Hello students, this is Alan Boris speaking to you from my office at Kenai Peninsula College. Today's topic will be the Riverine Kachemak tradition, continuing a set of lectures on the prehistory of the Cook Inlet area. This is a slide we've seen before. So the Riverine Kachemak tradition is this group here bounded by 1000 BC in this area to 1000 AD in this area. 2,000 years the Riverine people occupied Cook Inlet. And the significance that you should remember is this is the first archaeological evidence of salmon cultures, of an intensive salmon culture here in Cook Inlet. We don't know why there were no salmon cultures before 1000 BC. It has to do with the distribution of salmon, almost certainly. It's not because people couldn't figure out how to catch salmon, but either the salmon were not plentiful enough or other reasons. We don't know. One of the unsolved mysteries of the Cook Inlet area. And then they rather promptly disappear about 1000 AD and are displaced by the Denina. I have some thoughts on that, and we'll cover those as we go through the class. The Riverine people are coexisted with the Marine people further to the south. They may be one group. They may be a separate group. The terminology is a little confusing. When first found, Frederica de Laguna called all of the cultures the Kachemak tradition, which of course extends over into Kodiak and other places as well. But in subsequent work, it was apparent that there were at least two different adaptations: the marine adaptation, marine mammals, located in marine estuaries, and the riverine adaptation focusing on the rivers and permanent houses, sedentary people up and down the Kasilof, Susitna, Kenai rivers, and other places in Cook Inlet. So Doug Rieger and I, in an early report, in fact, here's the carbon dates from that report, yes. Here's the riverine tradition here. Separated and called this the Marine Kachemak and this the Riverine Kachemak to reflect that difference in adaptation. And that's the significance that you should know. We kept the term Kachemak, and maybe that was confusing, I don't know, because the earlier publications had referred to the cultures in the Kenai, Kasilof, Susitna area as Kachemak tradition, so we didn't want to wipe that out, even though it's a bit of a contradiction in terms. And maybe we should have just called it the Riverine tradition, I don't know. But that's the way it is, and that's the way it stuck. So the dates are pretty clear, from 1000 BC to 1000 AD, and then this rather sharp break, and the Denina appear. That will be a subsequent lecture. The Frederica de Laguna found some of the first finds by her survey, the one we talked about, or I talked about in an earlier class. And some of the first archaeological work was done in connection with these finds right here at a site on the Kenai River called the Merrill site. Homesteading occurred, of course, throughout south-central Alaska, and there was a homestead put in near the Kenai River, and some of the children of the families were playing in one of the road cuts and found this little figurine, this little face right here. It's about 2 inches across, I'd say, carved of that claystone that's common in the area. And of course it caused a bit of a stir, and rightly so. Showed it to their parents and showed it to a woman named May Sachansky, who was also a homesteader. She and her husband Ed homesteaded in the area, and she was also interested in history and was developing a small local museum, initially called the Damon Museum, and now has been moved and is part of the Soldotna Historical Society. and it was on display. At the same time, a man who grew up in this area, Doug Rieger, was working on his master's degree at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and was in anthropology and was interested, of course, from the area. And he began the first excavation at a Riverine Kachemak site at the Merrill site. And the report is still, of course, available and contributed to our early understanding of this group. Another find in the same area, same site, was this stone lamp, and it was found intact. What's interesting for this lamp is that it's made of limestone. Almost all of the other lamps are pecked from granite, but this was shaped from limestone. Limestone does occur in very small pockets on the Kenai Peninsula. If you're ever fished at the Russian River area, you maybe know of the Russian River Trail, and that trail about a mile in goes through a limestone area, and that could very likely be the source of this material for this lamp. If not, it would have had to been traded in from a long distance away. So these are some of the earlier finds, and if we go back to this very early find, we talked about this one, this remarkable stone lamp. This came from the mouth of the Kenai River. So it too would have been part of the riverine tradition and is part of this story. From a geographic standpoint, this is approximate areas of cultures around 500 AD. This is the Riverine area. The sites are in the Susitna area, river area, Kenai, Kasilof, Kustatan. They're in pockets around here. No sites other than right on the rivers. No sites in the upland areas. No hunting camps. The sites are all village sites with large houses, 5, 6, 8 houses, something like that. At the same time, the marine Kachemak would be in this area, and again reflecting that different adaptation, marine mammals versus primarily salmon. And coincident, the Dena'ina likely territory was in their homeland area in the Lake Clark, Milchatna River area, but also extending further north into the Kuskokwim drainage in this area up here. And we'll talk about that when we talk about Dena'ina origins and the movement from stories talking about movement from the Kuskokwim area down into Lake Clark area. So Riverine Kachemak will be in this area, and almost certainly we have not found all the sites yet. There will be more to find. These are some of the sites on the Kenai and Kasilof River. I'll talk quite a bit about this one right here, Kenai 147 and Kenai 043 here, because I was involved in those. I also worked at, this is the Merrill site right here, Kenai 029, and I've actually worked on a lot of these and been to all of them. So this gives you an idea of their distribution. Let's talk about the Moose River site. So this is the Moose River as it flows into the Kenai River here, and the Kenai River then makes this bend and goes on down. The site is in this area here. This is Isaac Walton Wayside. It's a state park. I'll talk about it and show you pictures of it give its location, because I know you'll be respectful of the site, but also it has protection because park rangers visit it all the time. We don't want information to get out that would result in destruction and looting, which is both illegal and unethical. Another site in this area, and it's very likely this whole area was part of this Riverine Kachemak complex at one point in time. The one thing I'd point out is that all the sites, and I'll develop this later as we talk, but all of the riverine sites seem to be at the end of a straight stretch of river, because I will develop the concept or the idea that I think one of the primary ways of fishing was drift net fishing in the river, drifting a net down, targeting red salmon or sockeye salmon, and that's where the takeout point is, because it's hard to take a net around a bend. And then they would process the fish there and focus on drifting nets right down this river. They could easily have used seine type nets in the Moose River as well. This is that earlier excavation, 1975, a year earlier, that what now is the Isaac Walton Wayside had been transferred to the state. I believe the state bought it as a park, and Doug Rieger and I went in and did some testing. We knew of these large, shallow depressions that looked like houses on this little terrace above the river. There you can see the Kenai River in the background. And sure enough, there were artifacts, and so I put together this early Kenai Peninsula College excavation at the site. Here it shows it a little later. This is the depression, this is the house. This is about 12 meters across. It's a pretty big house, and I forget the width, 8 meters or so. And there's, I can't remember now, 4, 5, something like that, of these houses along this bench. And that this excavation the next year, 1976, was taken over by Greg Dixon, and he worked there, I think, a couple of years. These are some of the artifacts. In the upper left here are the notch stones, thousands of notch stones at a site like this, thousands of notch stones at most riverine sites. These are chipped stone in this area. This material, this red material, is a red chert, outcrops in Kachemak Bay, and the other materials probably were traded in. Here in the lower left are slate artifacts, and ground slate, important material. And these are various, I don't know, knives or points in this area. This material is, this reddish color could be blood. I think it's blood. You can test for that now. You need money, of course, to do that, but we used to clean artifacts quite nicely. Now we don't clean artifacts so nicely anymore, because there's lots of residue material that you can pull off of artifacts that will complete the story of their use. This is the excavation. This is about a meter. This is the burned material from the house. This is inside the house. And this is sand, river sand. This is the original deposit of the Kenai River. So they dug down into the sand, built the house, and then gradually it filled in through, I guess, living, and the artifacts would all be found within this area here. Here's a corner of the house. This would be the outside, and then it drops down here. That's the inside of the house then. So this is inside. This being the boundary, and here you can sort of detect the ridge at the end of it. So these are called semi-subterranean, standard technique of building houses in south central Alaska. Dig down into the ground and then build the house up from there. And this then being the original deposit of the Kenai River. These are some of the timbers that had fallen in, either from the roof or it could be from the wall. It was hard to tell. It was from here that we took some of the material for radiocarbon dates, and the dates for this particular site all fell right around 400 AD, and fitting within that 1000 BC to 1000 AD time span. So when you're dating material, of course, you're dating when the tree died, but we're making the assumption that there was a small lapse of time between when the tree died and when they used it to build the house. So this is a good indication of when the people occupied this particular house at the Moose River site. This is an important hearth description. In the center, we found this ring of rocks with this sort of pea gravel in the middle. We were excavating half of it. Part of the reason to excavate half when you really don't know what you're going to be finding, and this had been the first hearth that was excavated, is if you mess up on this side, you still have this side to recover. So we encountered and mapped these large rocks, and I sort of thought that was the end of it. But when we took out the pea gravel, what was underlain it was underlain by these large flat rocks. So the whole thing underlain by these flat rocks, and here the student is drawing the whole thing, and we're capturing it in drawing form. This, as I recall, was toward the end of the excavation, and I thought that was it. And so we took out the rocks, of which are still stored here in the lab here at Kenai Peninsula College. And surprisingly to me, those rocks were underlain by these large sheets of birch bark. And so this would have been the initial sort of rock lining area, and underlain by these sheets of birch bark. And Doug Rieger has subsequently found a similar type of hearth style at in other houses, although one I'll show you later did not have this particular style. The function of the birch bark, I think, is almost certainly as waterproofing. In cold ground, when you build a fire, of course it melts the top area, but there's also a kind of, engineers call it pumping, where the water will tend to migrate toward the porous areas. And so I think the birch bark probably functioned to keep that water from sort of sucking into the hearth area, as it probably did. And then the large rocks, in effect, function to protect the birch bark. So this is a style. When you find this style of hearth, you know you're dealing with the Riverine tradition. Later we'll describe the Dena'ina style hearth and the Dena'ina houses. They're situated in different places, but an entirely different style of hearth. And so we can tell from the excavation whether you're dealing with a Riverine style hearth, which is this complex type hearth as described here, or what it was a log crib filled with sand, which is the Dena'ina style hearth, which we'll illustrate in the lecture on the Dena'ina archaeology. This is another site. This is Nilnunqua site. This was excavated in 1978 by Doug Rieger and Bill Workman, and this is an aerial view of them doing the work at that particular site. So now I'd like to show you a more recent excavation in the year 2001 at the Kenai River site. And so the site is going to be located right in this area here. And this, by the way, is Kenai Peninsula College right here. And this is downtown Soldotna. Here's the Soldotna River Bridge. So for those of you who know the area, that orients you. And I'll show you some pictures of this grass flat. The straight stretch of river in this case is going to be this stretch of river, and they would take out here, and that's where the village fishing, a straight stretch of net fishing. This is Slycock Creek coming in here, and there's rapids and rocks and so on. So they would have fished in this particular area and stopped here, and the village would have been right here. This is a view of the site. This is that grass flats. By the way, the last remaining grass flats of this type on the Kenai River. All the rest have been developed, dredged, whatever it might be. So this is a very important area to maintain ecologically. And this, of course, the Kenai River, and the site is in the woods up here in this area right here, also protected now. Kenai Peninsula College, by the way, is up on this bluff right here. My office is about there. And this is Slycock Creek down here. So this is the excavation. Here the technique was to bisect the house. You can kind of see the house here, this broad dish-shaped thing. And then we put a trench, 1 meter wide trench through the middle of the house from outside to outside on the other side. This is the excavation without people in it, so you can see how we did it. If we had time, it'd be nice to excavate the whole thing, and someday maybe we can go back and do that, or somebody will. To my knowledge, no entire house has ever been excavated, and we need to do that to get a better idea of the overall dimensions, the size, lots of things we can then answer if we know the whole thing, the whole picture. So for now we did this bisection. This is what the site looks like. This is the excavation that I showed you right here where that red is. Make it redder right there. So this is just one house randomly selected out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 10 houses that exist at this spot. A few associated small conical pits, and then these red marks are excavations, 1 by 1, 2 by 2 meter pits, something like that, outside of the area, testing to see what we could find. Here's that terrace. So this is this low marine terrace. All of these are on a low terrace, meander terrace, very near the water. Just some photos of the excavation. This is a daily news photographer, and taking notes. Sherry here taking copious notes in these type of excavations. A little rain, not too much, do what we can. Here we're, just general views. Some of you have probably been fortunate enough to be on archaeological excavations, and if you haven't and want to, I hope you get the chance someday. I find it very insightful. And more pictures. This, by the way, it's not a good picture of her, is Marge Mullen. Marge was in her late 80s at this site, one of the first to show up and one of the last to leave. And she is noted because she and her family were the first homesteaders in Soldotna, Alaska. And she was absolutely privileged to work on this site. She has said, people have called me the first lady of Soldotna, but I know now that the indigenous people of this area were the first of the area. And I have learned a great deal from Marge, and I respect her tremendously, and it was an honor for me to be her teacher at this site. General views again. There was a lot of birch bark lining it. I think the birch bark was from a roof that fell in. It was hard to tell with the type of excavation we did, but here you see the trowel lifting up a little bit of that birch bark. This is a stepped entryway here, which goes down into the house, presumably from the outside of the house, and that's been described on sites in the Kuskokwim area on the Yukon, in Yupik territory. And part of the evidence why I think it's possible that these riverine people were Proto-Yupik or Yupik speakers. Here's some more of the either the wall or the timbers from the roof that fell in. We map all this stuff and try to get the pattern. Here's a post mold. This is where a post was in the ground, and it would have held up the roof or some kind of structure inside, and then over the years decayed, and you can see it in the ground, and you can map posts from that. We didn't excavate enough of the house to detect a pattern in the posts. There's my shoe. I call this archaeological post mold and archaeologist shoe. So, artifacts. These are some of the artifacts found, representative sample. This is slate, arrow points, various sorts of things. Fragments. These are gravers used to score rock. And then these are not stones. Get the whole circle here. So the blue over here indicates the percentage of the sample that were not stones. And I think this is about 1,000 artifacts right here. Almost all of them not stones. Lots of not stones. Not stones are the significant artifact and reflect the use of the area, use of the fishing that occurred at this particular area. Some other very interesting and surprising finds. We found this birch bark basket. So this is about 2,000-year-old birch bark basket with stones in it, and within amongst the stones were fish bones. So some of you who are anthropology majors or have interest may know about stone boiling. So the technique is to heat rocks in the hearth and then put the rocks into a watertight container full of water, and in order to boil water. In this particular case, there were fish bones in it, so they were making fish soup. Why they stopped is hard to say. Something interrupted this process. There's a couple of indications, this being one of them, that this was abandoned quickly, this house. This is representative of how stone boiling worked, and this was just a remarkable find. This was exciting. Exciting to everyone who is part of this. You never know what you're going to find when you excavate a site. This is another interesting find. This is within the house. There were two pits. One was empty, and the other was full of fish bones. So these are salmon bones, no tails, no heads, butchered salmon that were stored in these pits underneath, presumably the floorboards of the house, for consumption. So these are red salmon, or sockeye salmon, and that was the targeted fish. This was one means of storage. These could have been and probably were some version of what Yupik today people call stinkfish or stinky fish, head cheese, fermented fish, which is a kind of preservative and certainly an acquired taste. But our modern Western culture eats a lot of fermented foods. We elevate it to something tasty. But this is a form of preservation. But as far as I can tell, and as far as anyone can tell, the riverine people did not have extensive techniques for preserving salmon. Dried it, certainly. Stinky fish, head cheese type pits, but it was not until the Denina out at 1000 AD that the techniques of preserving salmon on a large scale were invented. So this would have been a restriction on population size. Salmon come in great numbers. You can't, but if you don't have a way to store them for later in the winter, they're not of great use to you. So they intensively fished for salmon, but they did not have an intensive storage system for salmon, other than these stinkfish bits and the standard dried fish. This is the hearth. You recall at the Moose River site, the hearth was lined with rocks, and here we'll draw it right like this. This is the hearth area, and this presumably would have been the top of the hearth. And why it was not lined with rocks, like the ones at the Moose River site and other sites, I don't know. It looked like there was some disturbance. I should finish this off. Here we go. There. But it was hard to tell. So I just don't know the answer to that. It's not typical. And yeah, someday somebody will, I hope, answer that question. So this is a stone lamp that was found, and this was another one of those really cool things. So it was upside down. This is the rim, and here is the marks in the sand on this sort of pedestal-like feature within the house where the lamp had been turned over. And here is the moss wick of the lamp as it was put out, as the lights were put out. And here you can still see infused in it the seal oil that was burned in the lamp. As we found it as a sort of a round rock, and we weren't sure we were dealing with a lamp. You don't know that right away, but it was very symmetrical. So the young woman who was excavating this particular pit, I took her aside and said, okay, let's practice. I want you to pick it up, straight up, turn it over, and we practiced with a rock of similar size. I didn't want to disturb anything that might be underneath it, out of excitement, which could easily have happened. So we kind of got set. There was a videographer there, and she picked it up, and immediately you could tell, because it was half a rock, it was a lamp. She turned it over, and there's the image you see now. So to run that back in time, over 2,000 years ago, somebody turned this lamp over, put out the lights. It is tradition among Alutiiq people that lamps should be left turned upside down, because lamps have a spirit, lamps have a power, and by turning them over, it controls the power. It's when they're turned up and lit that the power is released, so to speak. So we respect that tradition. So that lamp is now stored here at Kenai Peninsula College in its own box, turned upside down for some time when it could be displayed for you to see. So back to notch stones. These are a range of sizes of the thousands of notch stones we found at this particular site. They're essentially a pebble with a notch out of one end and a notch out of the other end, and were used to hold the net down in the water. I believe drift net fishing being one of the common forms of fishing. So we found this twined spruce root net material. It was rather fragmentary. You can see how small it is. There's the tip of a pencil. But it was a part of larger nets. In the context of the house, it looked like it had been stored, the nets had been stored on top of the house or in some kind of rafters inside the house, I'm not sure, and it had all fallen in. So we salvaged and picked up these bits of spruce root net. So this is the key: salmon bones, net, fishing. How are they doing it? So this something like this. So red salmon, or sockeye salmon, in the Kenai River, and as far as I know in all rivers, swim just offshore and near the bottom as they migrate up to spawn. So the net, this would be a model of a net, a spruce root net, would have been drifted on down, catching those salmon, guided by a man in a boat, with a float on the other end to keep it up in the water, and the notch stones tied off every so often in clumps to keep the net near enough the bottom so it catches salmon, but not so deep that the net hangs up on the bottom, because then you'd lose your net. The wisdom that would have been required to do this would have been to know how much to tie off at the bottom of the net to keep it low, so it catches salmon, and not too high, so the salmon swim underneath. What I'm getting at is the nature of the flow of the Kenai River varies dramatically through the summer. It spikes with the spring melt, and then it drops low and gradually increases in flow with the glacial melt in the Kenai Mountains. And you can detect this almost daily, certainly weekly. So as they were fishing, the wisdom would have been to know how many stones to tie off, add to the existing clump of stones to keep the net down in the water. And that's why you find so many stones. No sense untying what's there, retying on a bigger rock. Why not just add a few rocks as need be to keep the net? I was helped by this with a man who from the Kuskokwim area, a Yupik man. And I described what I thought was going on here, and he said, "Oh yeah, we still do that today, but you have the boat on the wrong side. The boat should be on the inside." Here, we'll get it over here. The boat should be over here in order to guide it properly. So he said, "Yeah, I still fish that way today. I, of course, use a metal boat, an aluminum boat, and a skiff, and a motor, but a nylon net. But we drift our nets in the Kuskokwim River the same way today." So another little piece of evidence why this is part of a Yupik tradition. Dena'ina tradition, we'll see, is quite a bit different. So at some point I'll get my little drawing out, my computer, and I'll shift this guy over here and move this back over here. But if I were to ask you to draw this, you would put the man in the boat over here. So here we have it. The Riverine system. So this is sort of a schematic. So here's the site. Here's where the houses are. So you would drift your net down this way. The salmon are coming up this way, just offshore near the bottom. Drift on down till you have fish. Take out onshore for processing. Pull your boat back up the river. Put it in again with your net. Drift it on down, but not taking any more than you need. It's not sport fishing. It's subsistence fishing. And so in this case, a significant limitation being that there were no extensive ways to store fish that could utilize the entire biomass. This is a set of aerial views of various sites. I want to establish the point that these sites, these riverine sites, are at the end of a straight stretch of water, a straight stretch of river, because it's very difficult to move a net around a bend or through rocks and rapids. So this one's on the Kachemak River, and here's that straight stretch of river, and there's the site area. Here's, this is actually the Merrill site, so here we go, straight stretch of river, and that's where the site is, here, before you go around the bend. This is also on the Kachemak River. Here we go, straight stretch of river, and this is where the site is. It's off of the air photo here, but you'll have to trust me, this then makes a big bend around like so right there. And here's another one. This is on the Kenai River, so here's, I'm not sure where it would start here, probably here, straight stretch of river. And there's the site here. There's also one right across the river here, just before you get to the bend. So drift net fishing, spruce root drift net fishing for sockeye salmon in the Kenai River, Riverine Kachemak tradition. This is a little graph I did with plotting some of the sites in terms of the slope of the river. So, in other words, these spikes here are rapids. This is the Naptown Rapids here, and I don't know what that rapids that is there, but these are different rapids, fast-flowing areas of the river. So this is the slope in feet per foot. So the lower it is on the graph, the more it would be quiet water. And so here I've plotted in river miles some of the sites that are riverine Kachemak sites, and they're all in the quiet water area. Again, another piece of evidence to suggest that they're drift net fishing in the river, because you want to do that in quiet water. So, Yupik or Sugpiaq, Riverine Kachemak tradition has a river salmon focus, drift fishing, lamps, stepped entryways, all of these things point largely to the Kuskokwim River area, Yupik area. So I think you can make the case that the riverine people were a proto-Yupik or related to Yupik-speaking peoples, whereas the marine Kachemak tradition has that marine mammal focus, harpoons, lamps, larger houses. These were probably related to the Alutiiq or Sugpiaq peoples who subsequently occupied the area. And last slide, this sort of sets the stage. So this is what we've been talking about. Here's the drift net, here's the houses, these are the salmon, targeting red salmon. The Dena'ina, as we'll see or hear about in the next lecture, targeted early run kings and the late run silver or coho salmon, who spawn up creeks like the tributary creek of Slycock Creek, which is right by the college. So we will make the case that they developed a different style of fishing, and the reason they targeted particularly the late run coho or silver salmon is they wanted to minimize the time between when they caught the fish and when they put them in a complex underground cache pit or cold storage pit. And that was a preservative, maximizing use of salmon and changing the ecological picture for the Dena'ina. So that story we'll pick up in the next lecture, and thank you very much.